Also press this bell icon.
Re-election in 2024, shortly after Biden certifies this vote, Brian.
Yep, Grover Cleveland. He won, he lost, and then he ran again, and he won again. So we'll hear a lot of those comparisons. Just like when Bush 43 ran after Bush 41, they compared it to the Addams family.
You mean the president's, not the movie?
Right. Now, Uncle Fester was not in the Addams family that I was talking about.
Okay, sorry. Listen, there's a lot going on. The president continues to talk about the possibility of fraud and it being rigged. So to try to sort it all out, Griff Jenkins has been dispatched to our location in Washington to update us on this Friday the 13th.
Hey, Steve, Brian Ainsley, good morning. Yeah, big hearing in Philly is going to start in just a couple of hours. A judge will hear 5 appeals where the Trump campaign is seeking to have some 8,000 ballots tossed for being, in their view, ineligible. Now, this after a victory yesterday for the Trump team. A judge ruled that the Secretary of State lacked the authority, extending a deadline to confirm their identity, but the ruling did not affect the total vote count. Trump campaign spokeswoman Kayleigh McEnany had this to say.
We believe in the counting process, that ballots without signatures, dates, and addresses, which are required by law, were counted in some Democrat counties, but not in some Republican counties. This would amount to potentially tens of thousands of ballots that were counted improperly.
Down south, the historic hand recount is about to begin in Georgia. They got to be done by noon next Wednesday with a certification deadline of November 20th. And out west, the Arizona GOP launching a lawsuit to force a hand recount just as other major networks join Fox News in officially calling Arizona for Joe Biden. Perhaps that's what China was waiting for. They extended congratulations in just the last few hours this morning via a foreign ministry spokesman. Meanwhile, former President Obama blasting the president's allegations of voter fraud and the Republicans backing him. We might not have that one, but trust me, he took a hard shot at him. And I wanted to play it because, you know, while President Obama in the 60 Minutes interview is saying that Republicans in particular backing the president are to blame for delegitimizing the election, a growing group of Republican senators, including Senators Langford, Graham, Grassley, and Thune, are all now calling for President-elect Biden to resume getting that presidential daily briefing. We'll see what happens. That'll be something to watch on Capitol Hill today. Brian Ainsley, Steve?
Yeah, sorry about that soundbite. Do we have a shot of Scott Pelley with his head like that?
Yeah, we do. We have an extra.
All right, thanks, Griff. Let's bring
Thank you, Griff. All right, let's bring in Geraldo Rivera. Sorry, Steve, you go ahead. Bring him in.
No, you brought him in already. There he is. We see his box right there.
All right. We're all fighting.
At the John He angle.
To bring you in, Geraldo.
I'm using the Joe Manchin.
Wrong way, Brian. There you go.
Yeah. Got it. Hey, Geraldo. So what do you make of this? So the president, he wins this legal challenge in Pennsylvania. Hi. And then we're doing the recount in Georgia. Do you think this will make a difference? What will we get out of this?
You know, probably not. The differences, the gulf seems too awesome for the president to overcome. But listen, this category of votes arriving late and deemed unilaterally by the Secretary of State to be qualified, even if they arrive 6 days after the election, it is a big enough category that it is one of those systemic problems that Jonathan Turley and I tried to warn against last week. These are the kinds of errors, these big hunks of errors that might make a difference. Now, in this case, this is 10,000 votes, they say, that are segregated. We don't know which way they would have gone, but mail-order ballots tended to favor Joe Biden. So let's assume that all 10,000 were for Joe Biden. That would reduce the 54,000 vote margin, more or less, in Pennsylvania to 44,000. That is still a Herculean task to surmount. To win back 44,000 votes there, 11,000 in Arizona, a similar amount in Georgia, goes on and on. These are daunting tasks, and I ask two things of the president. I ask that he begin this planning in his own mind to leave with grace and dignity, celebrating the fact that he is probably the most successful one-term president ever. He remade the court. He remade the economy. He got us out of, international deals that were all detrimental to the American people. He has so much to celebrate. Let him go out with grace and dignity. That would be a wonderful, wonderful item. Then run again in 2024. He'd be the strongest Republican by far. In the meantime, in Georgia. He'll go down to Georgia after Thanksgiving, and he'll win those 2 runoffs down there, too. But I just want him to start thinking that this process, as tight as it is, as agonizingly close as it is, has a shelf life that runs a certain amount of time. There has to be a certification by the states at a certain a certain date, certify this vote, and then we'll have officially a 46th president of the United States. Let things proceed by their constitutional, natural course.
And if things are proceeding, it's going to be a Biden administration. And who's going to be in the administration? Everyone feels as though they were promised something. Elizabeth Warren had a chance to type out an editorial, and here's an excerpt from it. She says, from the first day, this should be the priority. The lesson is clear. Bold policies to improve opportunity for all Americans broadly popular. Voters recognize that these reforms are necessary to fix what is broken in our nation. We need to deliver, even as Republican leaders can't acknowledge the election outcome and plan to grind Congress to a halt. The good news is there are lots of big changes that a Biden-Harris administration can achieve through executive orders and agency action on day one. You know Elizabeth Warren and how she profiles. What do you think she had in mind, Geraldo?
Well, I think that what she has in mind is intense hyper-regulation of banks and other, fiscally prudent, by her point of view, drain the rich kinds of actions.
Environment.
I don't credit Elizabeth Warren as Treasury Secretary, nor Bernie Sanders as Labor Secretary, for the simple reason that these 2 Democrats have states where there are Republican governors. If they leave to take these cabinet positions, they'll be replaced by the Republican governors, by anybody the Republican governor suggests. And I would suggest to you that at least one of those 2 Republican governors would pick a Republican to replace Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, tilting the Senate lead even more toward Mitch McConnell. So I don't credit them. And I think more broadly, in the sober light of day, when you look back at what this election had to say, what this election had to say is that the American people, particularly among the most conservative of the American people, the Latinos, detest socialism. They don't want socialism like they had back home in Venezuela or Nicaragua. They want good old-fashioned American enterprise. They want the chance to be all they're capable of being. They hate socialism. They need cops. The whole movement to defund cops is one that's ridiculous. Joe Manchin, who even if some miracle the Democrats win both seats in Georgia, Joe Manchin is not going to go along with packing the court. He has said as much. So, Chuck Schumer loses an ally right there if he attempts to expand the Supreme Court of the United States. Governing is going to be a lot harder for these folks than campaigning ever was.
Sure. And, the election was harder than ever before because of the pandemic. And without a doubt, the coronavirus impacted everybody in some measure. I mean, that's why there were so many mail-in ballots this time. And that's why there are so many complaints now from many on different political sides. And right now, you look at the infection rate, and it's approaching the stage, Geraldo, where it sounds like they may, shut schools down again, and it's going to be a very bleak Thanksgiving for a lot of people. Nonetheless, yesterday on The View, Joy Behar, who has been a critic of the president all 4 years, had this observation about what is going on with the president and the pandemic.
It occurs to me that Trump is so evil at this point. I really think he's evil. I think he absolutely relishes the idea that things are getting worse and it's going to be in Biden's lap. I really think he likes that. That's how sick he is.
Geraldo, do you think the president wants it to get bad so it looks bad for Joe?
I feel sorry for Joy to make a statement like that. I've known her forever. It is so, the cynicism there is dripping with venom. I really don't like it at all to wish evil on the country, to get back at your political rival, in this case, the rival being the president of the United States. I think it's awful. I think the president, having suffered it, having recovered, having his wife and son both infected, now having so many of his key allies in and around the White House infected, it is something that he lives with. Not to mention the fact that it is the pandemic that defeated him. He ran not against Joe Biden. He ran against this insidious epidemic that's affected the 4 corners of the world. And he could be just vulnerable enough for some suburban voters to swallow their distaste for the Democrat and jump that way. It is terrible timing. The fact that Dr. Fauci a couple of weeks ago was saying, a vaccine, it's not going to make life regular until 2022, for goodness sake. Now suddenly Joe Biden's president-elect and Dr. Fauci is saying, this vaccine is going to change everything. Wait until we get our hands on this before the end of the year. We're going to start vaccinating people, and the world will be swell again. I just, maybe it's all of the fact that for 4 years, President Trump has lived the most embattled presidency. Everything he has said and done construed the most evil way possible by the mainstream media allied against him. These pornographic pollsters that had voter suppression polls that kept people away from voting because they didn't think that their candidate had a chance. Like Wisconsin, he was down by 17, according to the latest polls. Yep. You know, things like that really have to be reassessed. Otherwise, we may never have another Republican president. If mail-in ballots become the thing, where voters need absolutely no effort whatsoever to cast a ballot. All they have to do is they get the mail, and then some party boss from the block comes walking around and say, you know, Jack, did you get your ballot? Let's see, did you fill it out right? Okay, let me mail this down the street. And he goes with a pack of 100 of them representing his block. You know, I think that that's the way politics used to be done when the dead used to vote twice in Cook County, Chicago, and when I was a younger man. You know, I think that there is some real election reform that has to take place. But if mail-in ballots become a thing, I think the Republican Party is going to be like the dinosaur. We're going to be extinct.
All right, Geraldo, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, Ainsley. On that happy note,
yeah. Have a nice weekend.
I know.
A shakeup of the Pentagon leadership is raising concerns about a swift troop withdrawal from Afghanistan, maybe South Korea. General Jack Keane to balance that story out. We've been hearing about it all week. A shakeup at the Pentagon's top leadership is reportedly raising some fears among military officials and reporters that the U.S. will accelerate its withdrawal from troops from Afghanistan, maybe South Korea. Let's bring in Fox News senior strategic analyst, retired four-star General Jack Keane. General, I watched you last night with Martha. You are not somebody that's alarmed about the change at the top.
No, I'm not. Because I've been told, and I take it at face value, that Secretary Esper, who, by the way, I provided some advice to and I thought was doing a pretty good job, to be frank about it. But the Trump administration, and I think the president himself, felt that Secretary Esper was not following the president's agenda. And he has every right to remove a cabinet official for whatever reason. But that's the stated reason, and I take it at face value. I don't buy into the hype that's coming out of this, that there's some Machiavellian plot here that's taken place by his removal and others, right. And therefore the president's going to rush through some troop deployments that are troop redeployments home that are not planned. Right. Based on what I've been told, is our planned deployments in Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and the timetables associated with them remain in place. No change.
General, in doing a lot of the interviews for Veterans Day, when some veterans have trouble adjusting back at home, you know what really hurt them, and I don't have to explain it to you, but maybe the audience, is when they watched what they did in Iraq in the surge get overrun when we pulled out and the creation of ISIS. They said, was this all worth it to lose life and limb for this? If that is indeed the case, and you back that up, do you worry about the same thing in Afghanistan among those who sacrificed so much over the last 20 years if we pull it out and the Taliban comes back?
Oh, yeah. I personally went through this over the Vietnam War, platoon leader, company commander, paratroopers, and then we walked away from it at the end because it was just too politically tough to deal with. Most definitely. The situation in Afghanistan, it certainly rises to that level. The violence is up 50% in the country. President Ghani, who I have spoken to, after he gave up his 5,000 prisoners, he was told he would have a ceasefire, which is what you would normally have when peace negotiations are going on, which is taking place now between his government and the Taliban. But there's no ceasefire. Quite the contrary. As I said, the violence has increased. Yes, if we just summarily walk away from that would be an absolute disaster for the country, for the American people's security. And yes, how we end the conflict, Brian, is actually more important than how we began it. Because the end has a legacy all of its own, and it sends a message to our allies and friends, but also to our adversaries. Right. And stick-to-itiveness and the mental toughness it takes to end the conflict favorable to the United States is, I think, in our national interest. We're no longer conducting a war in Afghanistan. Right. We've got a handful of people, a few thousand, that are helping the Afghans do the fighting.
Yeah, if you're in a wheelchair right now making your way through a kitchen in an adaptive house, you're proud of what you did, but if it goes away, that will do endless amount of damage to the young men in Iowa or the young woman in Montana. I want to pivot, if I can, to what's going on in Russia. I pick up the New York Times today, and I see in Alaska, one of these fishing boat captains said, are we being invaded? The Russians are in our economic zone in the waters off Alaska, and they're constantly breaching our air security. What message are we supposed to take from this?
Yeah, the Russians and the Chinese are applying a clever strategy. They took a page out of what the Iranians are doing with proxies, and what it is they're operating below the level of conflict as much as they can to intimidate and coerce our allies, to test the United States resolve. What Putin in particular is doing here, he loves the international press he gets out of this. And what's that about? He's playing it to his own audience at home, that Russia's back on the world stage as a powerful country, because his narrative is not that he's violating our rights, that they're violating his rights or Russia's rights. So that's what he uses this for. It's largely for his domestic audience. And by the way, good news, Putin's popularity is tanking in Russia due to the economy, but also due to his handling of the pandemic. They don't have the hospital infrastructure to support the number of cases they have in people hospitalized.
Yeah, it's amazing that vaccine didn't work. Who would have thought? Finally, real quick, the President of the United States executive order says companies that invest in China that has anything to do with the Chinese military, that is now banned. Really? What took so long? And this might be an executive order that even Joe Biden would have trouble overturning if indeed he does emerge as a president.
Well, let's just first, I think President-elect Biden, if he becomes our president, certainly has an opportunity to build on some of the successes that the Trump administration has had in dealing with the Chinese Communist Party. All that said, why did it come so late? I can only surmise, Brian, because the major issue that took almost 2 years with the Trump administration in dealing with the Chinese Communist Party was the trade imbalance and a tariff war that we're involved in. And any ancillary issue like this would have distracted from that and maybe hurt their leverage. So also delisting Chinese companies on the stock exchange is another thing that the Congress is advocating, and something that we should do because, one, they don't abide by our rules, and two, some of these companies are also supporting the development of Chinese military capability.
General, thanks so much. Always great. Retired 4-star General, Fox's senior strategic analyst. I appreciate you being with us today, General.
Yeah, have a great weekend.
You too. Meanwhile, coming up straight ahead, we move ahead. The list of Republicans flipping House seats is growing. Congresswoman-elect now, Nicole Malliotakis, defeating the Democratic incumbent to flip her New York district red. She's here to talk about it.
Nicole Malliotakis flipping New York's 11th congressional district red after Democrat incumbent Congressman Max Rose concedes. Republicans have now flipped 10 seats in the House, with 8 of them won by female candidates. New York Congresswoman-elect Nicole Malliotakis joins us now. Good morning to you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. What do you think was the reason for this seat and so many others flipping from blue to red?
Well, I could tell you here in New York City, and I assume in cities across America, people were really fed up with the direction the Democrats were trying to take us. In New York City, particularly where we have Bill de Blasio, we have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, they've moved our city so much to the left, and you have individuals like my opponent who had rallied with the defund the police movement and really had just gone along with the gang. And people want to see a two-party system. They want to see checks and balances. And I will be the only Republican representing our city in Washington. And it's a much-needed voice and perspective.
I know you represent the southern part of Brooklyn and Staten Island. There's 16 GOP women newly elected to Congress. Is the party changing? Was this the Trump phenomenon, or is this a permanent change for the Republican Party?
Well, I can tell you it's much needed new blood coming into the party. Not only do we have the most females in the history coming to Congress from the Republican side, but we also have a number of minorities. We have immigrants who have come from Korea, from Cuba, from the Ukraine, and we also have military veterans as well on the Republican side. But I can tell you that this is important because it's the messenger. We have AOC and the Socialist Squad. Now we have individuals who come from very diverse backgrounds, many who fled communism or socialism themselves, or like me, the daughter of a Cuban refugee, to be those messengers to say, why is socialism bad, and to push back and to make sure that we fight to preserve our freedoms and our liberties, and we reopen our economy, we keep the capitalist system that provides jobs and opportunity. And that is something that I believe, and obviously in this election results across the country, that Americans want. And I think that's a very, very critical point to be making.
And I understand you want to form your own squad, the anti-socialist squad. Tell me about it.
Well, look, we don't have a name, but there definitely is an interest and people who are concerned, and they have similar stories as mine. My mother fled communist Cuba in 1959. She came here for liberty and opportunity, as millions of immigrants did. We want to preserve that. We want to preserve the American dream that allows my parents' daughters, they came here as poor immigrants, their daughter is now going to be a United States congressperson. And as I mentioned, we have immigrants coming from Cuba, from Korea. We share that story, and we're going to get out there. We're going to tell that story to Americans, and we're going to fight back against those who want to dismantle the economy, who want to destroy capitalism, and who want to take away our freedoms and liberties and bring socialism to this country.
Well, congratulations, Congresswoman-elect. We look forward to watching your career.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. The Trump campaign picking up a legal win in Pennsylvania. So what does the court battle look like moving forward? Ari Fleischer and Sarah Sanders here to discuss it next. The Trump campaign's election legal battle over or after a judge rules that Pennsylvania's Secretary of State lacked the authority to extend the deadline for voters to confirm their identity.
All right, this comes as a hand recount of nearly 5 million ballots begins today in Georgia.
So where does the president and his team go from here? Let's have a discussion right now. Fox News contributor and former press secretary to President George W. Bush, Ari Fleischer, and Fox News contributor and former press secretary to President Donald Trump, Sarah Sanders. Guys, good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning.
Ari, at this point, it seems as if with these affidavits and these filings that the president and his legal team have made, it seems like the current legal strategy is to delay the certification of the election as long as possible. Does it look like that's going to work?
No, but I think it's important to separate two issues here. One is, are there enough votes for the president can get to overturn the election results? The second is the more lofty, broader, long-lasting principle of, do we have problems and fraud in the election that need to be cleaned up? And the answer to that is emphatically yes, and that's why these cases should proceed. Look, as you just pointed out, what happened in Pennsylvania was the Constitution was upheld. The rights of a legislature to set the rules for elections was upheld. No Secretary of State can unilaterally step in, especially an anti-Trump Secretary of State like this one, and change the rules on a whim. That's what we have laws for. We're a nation of laws, not men, and that's what this court upheld.
I mean, Sarah, you've been in politics with your family for decades. What needs to change as far as the voting is concerned? Do the machines, are they too antiquated? How do we fix this problem so we don't see it again?
Well, every state's a little bit different, and people are operating under a different set of rules. So I think we have to take it case by case. But I think the most important thing, and I think Ari certainly touched on this, is that we need to make sure that we are fixing the system, because at the end of the day, we need to make sure every American has confidence in the validity of our elections. That is utmost importance of making sure that people feel like every legal vote was counted, that there wasn't fraud committed, and that they can go to sleep having confidence knowing that their vote was counted, that it was tabulated, and that the person who was meant to win by the selection of the people who voted for that person is the ultimate winner. And I think that is so important in this process, and we don't want to get lost in that we must have transparency and we must have confidence in our elections.
And hopefully we'll come out and we'll see what's going to happen in Georgia with the recount by hand. We'll see what happens in Wisconsin. I think that's going to be recounted. And we'll maybe have an independent arbiter look at this Dominion software to put any unrest or uneasiness about it to bed, if indeed it should be, because there were some issues, but they said it didn't amount to any permanent ballot switch. We just don't know for sure. So now let's talk about what we do know for sure. January 5th will decide the balance of power in the Senate. Republicans need just one Senate victory. The Democrats need 2. So money is pouring in for the next 2 months. What is the message that's going to resonate with a changing Georgia electorate, Ari?
Well, what's fascinating about Georgia is this is not unusual. Having 2 races in one cycle can be unusual, but Georgia typically has a runoff, and going back to when Bill Clinton won the presidency in 1992, there was a runoff a couple months later, and the Democrat lost in a year that that a Democrat won the presidency. There's a big difference between the intensity of turnout in a presidential and the intensity of turnout in a special, and in Georgia, that special typically goes Republican. So it looks pretty good.
Is there anything typical?
Republicans
Ari, there's nothing typical about Georgia now.
Yeah, no, there still are some typical things, Brian. There's some patterns that are very hard to overturn, and I think the massive turnout in the presidential is what made Georgia different. Yep. Georgia's close, but it still leans Republican.
Sarah, the Democrats are going to back up the Brinks truck and spend a lot of money in that state. You know, this is a good time to own a TV station in Atlanta and all of the Georgia markets.
Certainly a lot of money will be spent, but I think the big contrasting message that the two candidates, particularly on the Republican side, have to make is what is at stake and how different our choices are here. I think, we are fighting back. These are the last two places where we can hold the line and fight back against the liberal mob. I think the last thing Americans want is for Chuck Schumer to join with Nancy Pelosi and push socialism down our throats and allow the liberal mob of Washington to take over communities all over the country. These two seats are critical at stopping that, and we need to make sure we're doing everything we can to push both David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler over the line and make sure they win those two seats so that we have some checks and balances in Washington. It could not be more important to have that than it is right now.
Okay, Sarah, Ari, thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. All right, Janice has your weekend forecast on this Friday the 13th. Hey, Janice.
Hi, good morning. Yes, we are saying goodbye to this latest tropical storm, Eta, which of course brought so much destruction. It was just a tropical storm, and we saw incredible amounts of flooding and destruction from this tropical system that moves across Florida and the southeast. You can see the temperatures behind it. We've got much cooler air moving in and another cold front that's going to help push the remains of Eta offshore. So there's the satellite radar imagery. A little bit of rainfall across the coastal North Carolina region, certainly gusty winds, and we're going to see some big waves and surf all along the East Coast, but we're going to say bye to this system today. There's your forecast precipitation. So behind this, we have a weaker system that's going to bring the potential for some showers, maybe some snow, depending on how cold it is where you live across the Great Lakes and the upper Midwest. And then the West Coast, big changes here. A lot of heavy rain along the coast and some mountain snow to prime for skiing season as we get into the winter months. So there's your forecast today. Much quieter as we say goodbye to Eta. We'll deal with some mostly sunny skies here in New York, hopefully. And then that system's going to move in this weekend for the East Coast, portions of the East Coast. Cooler weather across the northern plains, and then that system moving into the northwest is going to bring the potential for heavy rainfall along the coast, some flash flooding potential, and winter weather advisories across the Rockies and the Cascades for the Pacific Northwest. Have a wonderful weekend, my friends. Friday is here.
I know.
Steve Avery Bryan.
You too.
Thank you, JD. All right. Meanwhile, after
Jedediah and Will. Hey, guys.
Good morning.
What's up, guys?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. We wanted to get your reaction to this because, there's so much infighting in the Democratic Party. Which way do they go, moderate or very progressive? And Joe Manchin, who's way more moderate, he thinks these socialist ideas are crazy. He was on with Brett on Monday, and he said that he is committed to vote against ending the filibuster and packing the court. And then he reiterated that message on Twitter. This is what he tweeted out. He said, defund the police, defund my butt, but I'm a proud West Virginia Democrat. We are the party of working men and women. We want to protect America's jobs and health care. We do not have some crazy socialist agenda, and we do not believe in defunding the police. And then AOC, let me show you what she tweeted out. A picture of her sitting behind Joe Manchin during the State of the Union address, giving him the stink eye or the death stare. What are your thoughts? Jedediah, since you're the female on the panel, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, this is funny to watch, but this is exactly what's going to go on now. And Joe Biden's going to have his hands full, frankly, because AOC is not going to back down. To her credit, she believes strongly in what she's saying. I don't think she's a phony by any stretch. But it's not just going to be Joe Manchin. It's going to be a lot of Democrats that are deeply concerned about race losses in the House. It's going to be a lot of Democrats that are worried that the defund the police movement and the movement towards socialism and socialized medicine is a big problem. And let's be honest, the message of unity from Joe Biden sounds great. But it's hard to unify within your own party, let alone to reach across the aisle and have Democrats and Republicans come together. So he has his hands full, to say the least.
All right, so I want you to hear what AOC said about her defunding the police. She's not the only one. Believe me, that was the chant of the spring, and then I will have you weigh in. Let's listen.
The path towards justice is a long arc, and that it happens in steps. Safety is not just an officer with a badge and a gun, but that safety is also a mental health worker that shows up when you're in crisis. Safety is making sure that you are not evicted from your apartment in the middle of a pandemic.
So I'm not too sure that Joe Biden feels any differently, Will. I mean, he was quoted during the debate as saying he announced that black parents were right to worry that their children would be shot by the police.
Yeah, I don't know that there is a civil war within the Democratic Party. There might be a few heretics like Joe Manchin or Abigail Spanberger, but I think AOC has come to define the Democratic Party. I mean, put yourself in her shoes. She wins a district in Queens with 70% of the vote. She's universally loved by her fans on Twitter. And at this point, the Democratic Party echoes her sentiment. She is the Democratic Party. But while she is the Democratic Party, Brian, she's not American. I do think there are storm clouds on the horizon. I think Democrats are very excited about a possible presidential win. But 2 years from now, 4 years from now, this message, I think if they read between the lines, and it doesn't take much reading between the lines, America rejected defund the police. America rejected identity politics. So best of luck to the Democratic Party embracing AOC.
You know, Pete, the more she said, the more times Republicans repeated what she said, and it helped the Republicans ultimately during this election.
That's true, because she's a privileged moron. And what she just said, it makes no sense. She'd be the first person to call the police if she was assaulted or accosted. Anyone knows a badge and a gun are required in situations where you can't just send a social worker. It's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard on its face. But then you've got Joe Manchin, sick burn, Senator, defund my butt. Like he's talking like your grandpa would, trying to take on the young kids, and it ain't going to work. I mean, I second what Will said. This is not your daddy's Democrat Party. In fact, I know I'm on to talk about another book, but the book I previously wrote called American Crusade, Chapter 4 is called Leftism, How Democrats Left America. Quite simply, your grandfather's liberal Democrats have been replaced by leftists who are globalists, who hate America, who want to tear down our structures because they're so woke that the patriarchy has to come down and our history has to be rewritten. Joe Manchin's done. He's not the Democrat Party. He's gone. He might as well change his party affiliation. They are the party of radicals. Nancy Pelosi, she's a residual of the old school liberals from San Francisco. We're talking about leftists now who want to tear down America and rewrite our history. So we're going to have this infighting segment 15 times in the next month, and they're going to have a reckoning. I think it goes to the side of the left, unfortunately.
Pete, I know you have been working on another book. Tell us about it.
Yes, got a new book coming out on November 24th. Really proud of this one. It's called Modern Warriors. It's based on the special we did on Fox Nation. It's based on 15 interviews with its SEALs, its Rangers, its Green Berets, its Medal of Honor recipients, snipers, guys and gals that have walked the ground since 9/11. And I wanted to take people behind the scenes, take you into a one-on-one conversation. You're at the bar. He's telling the real story of what it's like to smell combat and feel it and hear it, and then how to transition back home. So Modern Warriors it's gritty, it's raw, it's real. Great. You'll enjoy it yourself or give it as a gift, and it's the first Fox News book. So
excellent.
Check it out.
It would be great to go to a bar, read the book, and not have to order food. So those are the days.
Not for a while, Brian.
Yeah, I know. I keep hearing. Jedediah, I understand you've been booking the show all week. Who have you come up with to make those guys look good?
It's been quite a job, you know, and no one wants to come on with Pete and Will. Would you believe that? No, I'm just kidding. Everyone loves Pete and Will. All right, we have Senator Marsha Blackburn, we have General Jack Keane, we have Franklin Graham coming up on the show this weekend. We have a packed weekend. You guys should join us. You know, we can put it in 6 boxes. No problem. You see, it works here.
The Brady Bunch thing.
Yeah. We watch it from home. Okay, now with a review of Pete's new book, Modern Warriors, here's Will. Will?
Well, it is. I would suggest it's 5 stars. Is that how we rate books? 2 thumbs up. It's #1, top of the Amazon list. New York Times. Who cares? Is it already #1, Pete? I mean, I don't know. Probably.
It is now.
Right.
Endorsement, it is now.
Go get it, folks. It is.
All right, we'll be watching.
All right, guys. Yes, we will.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all for coming on. You're welcome. Guys. All right, let's hand it over to Janice. Janice has our weekend forecast for us. Hey, JD.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to see everyone on the weekday and the weekend. Let's take a look at it. We had Tropical Storm Eta made landfall in Florida, brought a lot of destruction to parts of Florida as well as the southeast. Just a reminder, it doesn't take a hurricane to cause incredible amounts of damage and flooding, but we're going to say bye to this system. Thankfully, 45-mile-per-hour post-tropical system moving out to sea. But we still have the potential for some heavier rain showers across portions of the coastal North Carolina area, South Carolina, and then we're going to see the rough surf and the rip currents along the coast. So that is going to exit very quickly for this weekend. We do have a weaker system behind it that's going to bring the potential for some unsettled weather across the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, the Northeast, and parts of the Great Lakes. And then the West is very active with more heavy rain and mountain snow. It's kind of a good news situation for them because we've had so much wildfire danger and it's been very dry. So much needed moisture for the West. And then, of course, the tropics are not over yet. We have had Eta and Theta, and it looks like we could have Iota this weekend in the Caribbean. It's not over. It's 2020. It keeps going and going and going, so we'll keep you posted. Back to you, Steve Ainsley-Bryan.
All right. Thanks for the swirling clouds. It was a wonderful effect. I owe you a favor.
All right.
If you're a bear, let us know.
All right. Because that would be news.
Yeah.
All right. Coming
Jillian
up,
would have it.
A big Republican victory in the state of California. We're going to talk to the woman who flipped her Southern California district from blue to red. She got the check.
That happens a lot.
How many more are up for grabs? One California House seat flipping from blue to red. Republican Michelle Steele defeating her Democratic challenger, the incumbent, in a very close race that Cook Political Report labeled lean Democrat. So Steele's win, adding to the record number of Republican wins elected to Congress this year. Look at that. Congresswoman-elect Michelle Steele joins us now. Good morning to you, Congresswoman-elect. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for inviting me this morning.
I'm sure you are. You're welcome. Congratulations on flipping this seat. How did you do it?
You know what? I just stick to the issues because, I already have a proven record, lower taxes and less regulations. Since, COVID-19, we closed down almost like 8 months. Most of, businesses been closed down. So I stick to the issues. And another thing is that, there are a lot of people want to defund the police or dismantling. Instead, I actually declared Orange County Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. And you know what? We have to support police and all these law enforcement officers because 99% of these people are good people. We keep training and we reform, but you know what? We cannot dismantle or we cannot defund. So I just stick to the issues, and I think that's the reason that I won.
I know that you and Marilyn Strickland are the first two Korean-American women that have been elected to Congress. She is a Democrat, and she won in Seattle. Tell me your story. What made you want to serve?
You know what? Actually, first generation, and I was born in Korea, raised in Japan, so I speak Korean as my first and Japanese my second language, and English is my third. Never thought. My mom actually was harassed by one of the tax agency they call State Board of Equalization. That's the reason that I decided to run for State Board of Equalization, and that's the way I started. This is my 5th election. I won all 5. You know what? I stand for American dream.
What do you make of so many women and minorities being elected this year?
You know what? Republican Party is growing. I mean, me, with my accent, I still won. And people actually, when we stick to the issues and we just try to work with residents and work for residents, I think we're going to keep winning.
Yeah, your accent is part of your story. You're a beautiful person. You speak 3 languages, and don't let anyone tell you differently. Congratulations. Go out there and fight in Washington.
I will. Thank you very much for inviting me today.
You're welcome.